Hey everyone, it's Triple Mango Threat, and today I have a special interview with my uncle. He actually got to play Magic the Gathering back in 1993, so let's jump right into it. Hey everyone, it's Triple Mango Threat, or Ashley, and today I have with me my uncle Jim. Jim, could you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got introduced to Magic?
Well, I was working at a company called White Wolf Game Studios from 93 to 94, a couple weeks, or maybe a month prior to the big convention that year where Magic was unveiled for the first time. The people behind it came to White Wolf, which is located in Stone Mountain, Georgia at the time, and they demoed Magic for us. So that was kind of cool.
How often did you get to play?
Well, the day that they demoed, pretty much the company shut down. I mean, there were 30 or 40 of us there, and we had a large conference room where you could get maybe, I don't know, 10 or 15 people in, and we had other places around the building that people could work on their decks and all this kind of stuff, and it just seemed like work ground to a halt for a few days. I don't remember what day of the week it was, but it seemed to me the rest of that week was basically, toast. Yeah.
What decks did you have, or do you remember them?
If I recall correctly, in those days they had starter decks and boosters, and the boosters were 15 cards, if I remember right, and the starters were 60, if I remember right. And everybody was given a starter and I believe 2 or 3 boosters. And you just kind of made whatever you had. It was a very basic version of the game compared to the modern era of it. So we didn't have things like dual lands and stuff like that. You only had the basic lands. And because we didn't have a lot of cards each, you couldn't have like monochrome decks. Most of the decks were basically, you just, sorted the cards that you had into a big pile and started playing.
Do you remember any specific card that you thought was really powerful?
Oh yeah, the Force of Nature. I had the Force of Nature, and I also had the black flying trampler guy, the Evil of the Pits, or whatever the heck that guy was called. And they were powerful because, well, number one, they couldn't be taken down with a fireball or anything. If I remember right, the Lord of the Pit was an 8/8 trampler. And because it was trampling, obviously, if you had a 1/1 block it, then you still have 7 damage going through. So it was fairly brutal, but it was hard to bring out because of the amount of mana required. And specifically, if I remember right, it was a 4 green, 4 any type thing. So you had to have 4 greens. But boy, when it came out, it was very impressive.
How many colors did you play?
Well, like I said, most people just played with whatever cards they had, and because we didn't have that many, you didn't have hundreds of cards. I mean, most of us had less than 100 cards, so there simply weren't enough lands to play a 1 or 2 color deck really for a while until we really got into the trading with each other. So I would say 3, 4, 5 colors. I mean, a lot of people just sorted, the cards they had, cut them or whatever, and just played with what they had. And it was kind of a surprise whatever came out of the deck.
What colors did you enjoy playing?
Me, myself, I was kind of gravitated to black and blue. I like my black and blue deck. So it was mostly black for the mobs and mostly blue for the denial spells, or whatever you call them, not interrupts, but the counter spells, cancel spells, stuff like that. Unfortunately, those kind of decks, at least back then, were extremremly unpopular to play against. Once you got sufficient number of counters in there, then it was a drag. So you'd throw in other things too. I remember I would either sub in like a green or white in there as well, just to have some extra diversity in there, and also because I didn't have enough cards really to play just a 2-color deck. I don't think I had 40 total cards that were black and blue, even though I put every one that I had, that I owned in there at the time.
Did you trade your cards?
We did, although not a lot. And certainly it wasn't, because the game was so new, it was very difficult. Well, the value of cards were different than it was today. So we had the Mox cards, for instance, but anything that gave colorless mana was kind of discounted back in those days, because the real issue with most decks when you're playing with just a random assortment of cards is getting enough of the colored cards. And if you're playing like 4 colors and you need 3 swamps or whatever it was to bring out your really nice black creatures, then that could take a very long time.
So those were less valuable to people.
Yeah, it seemed that way. And also, like, for instance, if I recall correctly, I think there was only like 1 spell that actually could target an artifact
Was it Shatter?
Shatter or something like that could actually, and it was, even that was not well sought after. I mean, if you have 100 cards in your deck and one Shatter, then really how much use is that going to give you? You know, you have to pray that it comes up, you know, when somebody's got an artifact that's beating you to death.
Did they still have a limit back then of how many copies of a card you can have?
Oh, goodness.
Like, oh, you can only have 4 counter spells in your deck.
Right. I do not believe so back in those days. I do recall playing where you could have no more than 4 of any particular kind, but I don't believe it was that way at the start. But it was so unoptimized compared to, you know, a fast mono deck, or, you know, with its extremely, you know, very tight, have a precise number of lands and this kind of thing, like they'd have, you know, more along the lines of what they have today. So it wasn't really that big of a factor. And plus, we didn't have people with thousands of cards where you could have 20 squirrels or 20, you know, whatever in there. In fact, I remember vividly the very first mono deck that I ever saw was by a gentleman by the name of Stuart Wick. He had the very first Goblin deck, or the very first all-red monochrome deck, and he traded a bunch of people because nobody wanted the goblins. So he had his Goblin deck, and that was the very first time I had seen a Goblin, or I'd seen a monochrome deck.
Was that like a big shock to you that somebody actually could get all the mountains and all the different goblins? Well,
it became evident how powerful that was against a 4-color deck, simply because every land that he drew was obviously, you know, something that went precisely to no matter what he had in his hand. So that was kind of a revelation. And also up to that point, most people did not play with whatever the minimum number of cards is. It 40 or 60?
Depends on the format.
Well, it's as old as it gets.
Yeah, if it was just like tabletop, like what you guys were doing, it's probably 60.
Okay, so, I mean, literally, if you only had a starter that had 60 cards and then a couple boosters, you only had 90. So, I mean, you'd probably have to run at least 3 colors just to have enough cards, basically.
Wow.
Yeah. But when literally you'd have to have 2/3 of your entire possession of cards in your deck in order to have a 60-card deck. So, yeah, those were the days.
Did you keep any of your cards?
I did for a while. I was there for about a year after that. I left in the following September, so I was there for a year and a few months after that. I remember before I left, I did give away the cards that I have, and back in those days, nobody had card protectors or anything. You literally had a stack of cards. And I remember at that point, mine was about, 2.5, 3 inches thick. So I don't know how many cards it was. It might have been maybe 200. But yeah, I just gave them away to the people that were still playing, which is most people. Most people were playing at least casually, and I didn't have any real time for it. And I wasn't quite as hooked as a lot of people were. So I gave away the cards that I had.
Did you ever play Magic Online?
I did, actually. When it came out, I thought that was a kind of a great idea, a great way to have it. You wouldn't have to worry about cards wearing out and that kind of stuff. And I played it for a while, but I never did it enough where I could be anywhere near competitive with it. And I kind of don't like games that you've got to be super into it, or else, some 12-year-old kid's going to come in there with his perfectly optimized whatever deck and just, kill you. So I never, I don't recall. I expect I spent some money on decks, virtual decks or whatever they're called, virtual cards, but it was never that much. I played it for a few months maybe and then gave it up.
Do you think you'll ever play Magic again?
Probably not. There is so many, it has evolved so far beyond what it was back in the day. You'd have to have so much card knowledge, game knowledge. I mean, now you've got your commanders and all these things. Like basically, I still remember the time at the start where someone would play a card that you'd never seen before, and then everybody was sitting there reading over their shoulder, okay, this will do 3 damage unless you're an undead or whatever. And, if I were to get into it today, every card would be that way for me, because who plays regular Fireball nowadays? Or, whatever card that I would have, does anybody play a Force of Nature card anymore? Probably not.
I don't believe so.
Yeah, it's probably not, high up on anybody's list. So basically every card that displays would be some new, thing to see. And I just don't have enough brain power to handle that many cards. I have no idea how many thousands of cards there must be nowadays. So,
do you know there are actually some cards people still play from when you were playing?
I've heard that some of them have been outlawed, like the Mox. Some of the Moxes or whatever were gone, but yeah, I can't imagine there were that many. Maybe like Sarah Angel, or there was this Jin back in the day that was pretty good, like a 6/3 flying Jin or something like that.
No, nobody plays him.
Oh.
If you're playing Sarah Angel, you're probably playing an Angel deck, but it's not very good anymore.
Right.
Have you heard about the Power 9?
No.
So that is the 9 cards in Magic the Gathering that are either limited or they're banned from a format. And so the first 6 cards, or the first 5 are all the Moxes of each color, and then there's Black Lotus. And then the 3 cards that are left over, can you guess what colors they are?
Blue.
Yep, they're all blue.
Or I would say black, because some of those deck searching things are just redonkulous.
Yes.
But yeah, the blue ones, the counterspell, or maybe not counterspell, but things like that, basically, that it makes the game unfun.
Right, for 1 blue, you could draw 3 cards.
Right.
Time Twister, which is like, you take your hand, you shuffle that into your graveyard, into your library, you draw 7, and then also... there's another one I can't think of, but and the prices are insane right now.
Oh, tell me about it. I cried that my retirement will not be as profitable or as nice as it could have been with all of the cards that I gave up that were, that are now quite so valuable.
Can you believe people are trading in their cards and buying houses now?
Yeah, it's used to be that you'd buy a house and then you would find some old baseball cards in the attic, and then you'd score by a Babe Ruth card or whatever that kind of thing is. Now you turn in your cards and you buy the house. So what's the logic there? But yeah, I mean, it was fun. It was definitely fun back in the day. It was such a revelation for the time. There were many your role-playing games. You had games like Car Wars, which are kind of more action-oriented games, stuff like that. But for a card game, it was so unique. When it came out. Now, of course, you've got 500 different variations on it. The Pokemon cards, all the various properties that have gotten onto that bandwagon. But for its day, it was such a revelation, and it literally I want to say it was Gen Con, but I was. You're right. Yeah, that Gen Con was so. Not crazed. Basically, anywhere you looked, there were people playing Magic, and the Wizards of the Coast people had brought like every card that they had. They'd put up all their money or whatever. They had gotten a big delivery from Cartamundi over in Belgium, and they brought them all there to the convention. And I expect they were all sold out within the first day. And it was a 3 or 4 day convention. I think it was Friday through Sunday. And the rest of the convention, you literally had people at every table, sitting on the floors, everywhere. And at an elevator, you just saw people with fans of cards, or their Magic cards, and ooh, look at this, or whatever. And it was the entire convention. And then the next year, the following year, it was that, but worse. I mean, you literally had people bringing suitcases of cards at that point, briefcases, and I think some people at that point had card protectors. It's like my cards, they just got played. I wasn't a collector or anything along those lines, so my cards were beat up and they were used.
From the research I did, they sold out within 2 days. They literally sold everything they had.
I bet. And those were... At least the ones that I had, those were the ones with this more squared off corners. They weren't the more rounded ones like the cards that they have today. These were, I don't know if it was beta or first gen or whatever that kind of thing is, but these had the less rounded corners on them. So
I believe that would have been alpha, because beta they started doing that little curve on the cards.
Right. Well, whatever it was, I remember mine looked different. The ones that I had seen like the next year did look more, they weren't as sharp. The corners weren't as sharp. So.
How many years did you play?
Well, I played at least about 1.5 years. When I left White Wolf, I gave away my card collection. And then I did play for a few months, maybe 3 or 4 months on the online thing. And I've known people over the years that have had cards that they'd loan you a deck and you could play that kind of stuff. But in terms of owning cards, I don't think I've owned anything since I tried the online version.
What years did you play? Like 1993 to...
It'll be 93 and 94 would have been the cards. And then whenever, probably within the first few months of the online game coming out, was when I tried that.
Did you enjoy that, the online one?
I thought the idea was great just from the standpoint of your cards never get used up. You never have to worry about, carefully packaging them and all that. Obviously, because they're virtual at that point, there could be any number of, very valuable. You can't really, with virtual stuff like that, you can't really say that this is worth all that much because they could make 1,000 more of them with a key press. So, is it still a thing? Do people still?
People still play Magic Online, and now there's a separate version called Magic Arena, which is like the nice-looking one for new players to get into.
Oh.
Magic Online is like for Modern and Commander. So like it looks, I've never played Magic Online, but it looks really old.
Yeah, well, I remember the interface. It was very basic, just have the cards and very simple animations, stuff like that. It was whatever their attempt was just to get it online. Yeah. So, but I would assume Wizards of the Coast have enough money to do it as professional as they want it to look,
Yeah. Yeah, people still have to pay for Magic Online. Like if they want to buy cards, they go buy tickets instead of cash, but I think one ticket is like $10 or I don't know the currency, but yeah, you still got to pay if you want to play a Black Lotus or whatever.
Yep.
Any experience that was just like, oh my goodness, I can't believe that happened, or...
Well, of course, every once in a while you'll have, you'll be at one life and, things looking really grim, and then all of a sudden you get the one card you're looking for and everything turns around. But as to specific ones, I was thinking back on it, it's difficult to believe that was nearly 30 years ago.
Yeah.
93. So, yeah, it's been 28 years since that time. So it's amazing it's been that long.
Well, thank you so much for chatting with me today.
Well, you're my niece, why not?
Yeah. Thank you all so much for listening. If you enjoyed this interview and would like more of this type of content, let me know in the comments down below, and who to interview next. Thank you to the patrons who help support this channel, and whenever you become a $10 patron, you can get an exclusive Ultra Sleeve each month. And subscribe for more Mango content. I'll see you all in the next one. Peace.